So we'll give it another minute or so. I see people are still dropping in.
Share the recording has started also.
Okay, let's get started. Welcome. This is the March 17, 2026 meeting of the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board. Again, a reminder, the meeting is being recorded. We will have time for public comments toward the end of the meeting at 12:30 p.m. So we'll start out the meeting by doing a roll call. So say aye or here or yes as I call your name. So Stephen Bedrick,
Here.
Steve March, Allison Jean Cole,
Here.
Jim Doherty, Mia Burke,
Here.
Michael Freeman,
Here.
Sage DeLong,
This committee
Here.
said Oregon would like to vote.
Aaron Ashley, Tim Seymour,
Here.
Representative Gamba, Senator Gorsuch, Rep. Levy,
Here.
Esteban Ortiz,
Here.
Rep. Tron. Okay, did I miss anybody, Mark?
I don't
Me.
believe so.
Okay, I believe we have a quorum.
About
Let's
David
start.
Boothroyd.
Oh, David, sorry, David.
I'm here.
Need to update that list online, I think. So first we'd like to welcome Allison to the board. Allison, maybe you could take 1 minute or so and introduce yourself to the board, your background and so on, interests.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Cole. I'm delighted to join you and learn more about your process and the history from you all. I'm going to be on the board representing Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility. Their organization has a vested interest in the cleanup at Hanford and also the downriver possible effects that pollution at the Hanford site has on Columbia River communities. I'm not a healthcare professional myself, but my background is in the sciences, particularly in biology and geochemistry. So I'm very interested in the cleanup process at Hanford from an engineering perspective. I look forward to meeting you all in person at the next in-person meeting as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Allison. And Allison, where do you live? Where do you hail from?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, okay. Okay, another Portlander. And we see your friend there as well.
Sorry,
Okay,
we have a puppy.
okay, we have some Oregon staff, Department of Energy staff. Would you like to round robin introduce yourselves, please?
You got it. Thanks, Jeff. I'm Max Woods, Oregon Department of Energy, Assistant Director for Nuclear Safety and Energy Security. Thanks, everybody, for joining today, our virtual meeting here. I'll pass it over to Mark Reese.
Good morning, Mark Reese, staff, Oregon Department of Energy Board Administrator.
Matt Hendrickson. I'm the radioactive waste remediation specialist.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Cecilia. I'm the Hanford hydrogeologist.
Okay, thank you. Jeff Schramm, EPA, would you like to introduce yourself? Can't hear you, Jeff. Okay. How about, well, Jeff is getting his audio sorted out. How about ecology, Ryan, and anyone else from ecology? Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hey there, Jeff. So my name is Ryan Miller. I'm the communications manager for Washington Department of Ecology's Nuclear Waste Program. Good to see you all again. And we have several ecology folks on the phone, so I think I can just roll call them out, starting with Eddie.
Yep, Eddie Holbrook, Department of Ecology Nuclear Waste Program, Deputy Program Manager.
Thanks, Eddie. Suzanne?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Suzanne Dahl. I'm the tank waste treatment section manager. So I have the double shell tanks and the 242 evaporator, LURF ETF, and all of the suite of tank waste treatment, whether it's the pre-treatment systems or the VIT plant, plus the disposal unit at the integrated disposal facility.
Thanks, Suzanne. Dan?
Good morning, Dan McDonald with Ecology. I serve as project manager in the tank waste treatment section, reporting directly to Suzanne.
Okay, and finally, I think I saw Dana. Dana, do you want to say hi?
Good morning. I'm Dana McFadden. I'm the permit coordination or communication specialist at Ecology.
Okay, Jeff, I think that's all of us from the ecology gaggle.
Okay, great. So we have some speakers from the U.S. Department of Energy, so we'll wait when they do their presentations, they can introduce themselves. And I see a couple other guests on here. Susan Coleman, would you like to introduce yourself in your role?
Good morning, Susan Coleman for the Chair of the Hanford Advisory Board. Thank you.
Okay, maybe that's probably good for now. So if we could, let's see, move on now. The first order of business is to review and approve the January 9 and November 13 meeting summaries. I'm sure you've all had a chance to review those. Does anyone have any comments, additions, or corrections?
No.
No? Okay, well, seeing none, I would ask for unanimous consent that we approve these two meeting summaries. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the meeting summaries are approved. Now, today's agenda, we're going to start out with several U.S. Department of Energy presentations, then move to ecology and EPA updates, rounding out the morning with Oregon Department of Energy, and we'll be discussing some comment letters in that section. And then finally wrap up with board business where we set a date for our next meeting or meetings. So with that, we will move into the next agenda item. That's U.S. Department of Energy. And I think Kelly Ebert is our first speaker. Kelly, take it away.
All right. I need just a second to pull the presentation up, Jeff. Just a sec.
Okay. So Kelly, this is when you can introduce yourself.
I'll introduce myself. Okay, thanks. So for anyone that doesn't know me, my name is Kelly Ebert. I'm here with the Hanford Field Office as the Projects and Facilities Division Director. And today I will be giving you an update on our transuranic waste program. So I can actually see the slides. So is it that others can't see it?
If everybody can, then just let me know when to advance. Can everybody see it okay?
Yeah,
you can see it.
Okay, if you could go to the next slide. So transuranic waste, just to give you an understanding of that, is radioactive waste containing more than 100 nanocuries of alpha emitting transuranic isotopes per gram of waste with half-lives greater than 20 years. And for those of you who are familiar with our waste isolation pilot plant down in New Mexico, this is the waste that we will be shipping down to New Mexico. So if you could advance to the next slide, please. So to give you an overview of the waste that we have out there on site for, this is solid waste. We have approximately 11,000 containers. Of those 11,000 in above ground storage, around 6,300 of those are ready to be certified. That means that there's no prohibitive items within the waste. They're in the correct packaging, and we just need to go through the certification process before shipping them off site. So I have two photos on this slide. One is to also highlight that we do still have waste in our burial grounds. This is considered to be retrievably stored waste, and there's approximately another 13,000 containers associated with the retrievably stored waste. The photo on the right is actually the solid waste boxes that we have out there in storage at CWC. These are the containers that we would send to WIP. Next slide. Here's a high-level overview of the facility. So this is our central waste complex out in the 200 West area. In the center there, these are the storage buildings where we store the above ground waste. As we prepare to send this waste to WIP, we go through the process of above at the top right here, the true waste evaluation. So that's evaluating the information we have on the individual waste streams. That's reviewing what process knowledge we have on the waste, what chemical characteristics we know about the waste, et cetera. And then off to the right, the actual certification process, that's when we'll go ahead and do non-destructive assay to determine the radioisotopes associated with those individual containers, and non-destructive examination, which is essentially x-raying the waste to ensure that there's no prohibitive items within. So the central characterization program is the responsible Carlsbad Field Office program that's currently on site. It's their contractor that operates it, Simco. They'll be performing the work, and then they will also be involved with preparing the shipments to WIP. Next slide. Okay, so current activities that we have going on out at site. So we actually mobilized the central characterization program in 2025. So they've been out on site, they've been hiring individuals, getting them trained, calibrating the equipment, working through procedures, and they've been also at the same time doing the initial acceptable knowledge reviews. So that's the documentation reviews that I mentioned. That's the first step in the certification process that needs to be done to make those containers eligible to go through the remaining NDE, NDA, complete the paperwork, and then eventually when we have a certified program to be available to ship to WIP. So we're scheduled to complete CPCO and CCP project startup reviews and start certification of waste by September of 2026, so this year. Currently, the contractor is wrapping up those project startup reviews. You can consider them to be essentially like a mini readiness review to make sure that all the everyone is familiar with the procedures, can operate the equipment, and perform the work appropriately. So EPA will be approving Hanford's waste characterization program before actual shipments to WIP begin. And so there's a couple of activities that I want to highlight that are part of this process and the timing associated with them. So we have the complete the generator site technical review. This was completed back in January of 2026. And then the next activity will be New Mexico Environment Department certification audits. You may also know them as EDMED. That's scheduled for July of 2026. Following that, EPA baseline inspection is scheduled for August of 2026. And then there is, a process of a waiting period in which we expect to receive final EPA compliance determination mid-2027. Next slide. Okay. I do want to show you some of the equipment that we'll be using out there as part of our certification activities. In the last few years, we've been working to either procure new or do repairs to the existing equipment out there to ensure it's available and ready to use during the certification process. So in the top left corner, I have the NDA equipment that will be used to measure the radioisotopes within the waste. The top right is our RTR.
Sorry, Kelly, some of us aren't familiar with the acronyms, so if you could maybe help us out.
So I apologize, that should have been spelled out. So it's a high energy real-time radiography. And then down below on the left, we call that the Super Hank. That's a super high efficiency neutron counter. So that's used as for the assay work. The HERTR is more of the X-ray that I had mentioned previously. And then we also pull samples from the containers to do flame gas assay, and that's the photo down in the right-hand corner. Next slide. So the site is also currently working on what shipping is going to look like when we start shipments to WIP. So CCP has a mobile loading setup, and the plan is that this will be available when we first start shipments, and it can be loaded outside directly into these true packed shipping containers that you see in this photo. And then currently we're also working on the design, and we will move into construction of a shipping structure that will also be located at the Central Waste Complex, directly adjacent to the storage facilities. Next slide.
Similar to.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Did somebody have a question? Okay, I will keep moving on, and then I can answer any questions at the end of this. So in resuming shipments, the Hanford shipping corridor has been maintained by the Carlsbad field office over the years, even since we last shipped, which has been well over a decade now. We continue to provide training for inspection and emergency response for WIP transportation activities, and continue to maintain equipment provided to those emergency responders. Prior to restarting shipments from Hanford, Carlsbad field office will ensure that the level of readiness is adequate for the inspectors and responders, and they'll conduct training exercises with them. There will also be some public outreach and education. They do roadshows, public education, and intergovernmental affairs. And CBFO, we've been closely coordinating with them, and they're planning to begin this coordination with these activities described above with the tribes and states in August of 2027. Next slide. Okay, and I do see I didn't include a slide, but I do want to highlight some of our tri-party agreement milestones and the dates that we're working towards. So the ready to certify, that is in by September of 2026 this year. So essentially we'll have run the first container through that certification process that I described. All the paperwork will be ready for that, and that will signify completion of that milestone. And then the following one is by September 2028, our first shipment to WIP. And we are working closely with Carlsbad Field Office to see if we can ship sooner. So that's a goal that we are working towards at this moment. So is there any questions that I can answer for folks?
There may well be, Kelly.
Yeah, come on in.
I will kick off with a first question, if I could, and could you describe the Hanford shipping corridor, in particular, which route you go through in Oregon?
I do know it goes up through Cabbage Hill, is my understanding. I don't have a map in the presentation on that one.
Any other questions from the board or the Oregon Department of Energy?
I do have a question. This is Rep. Levy. So this is my district that you'd be going through. Cabbage Hill's the worst hill, signified the worst hill in America. So what do you do with the traffic that's surrounding it while you travel through that hill? Is there some way that you can stop traffic from going there while you maneuver the hill and get clear over on the other side and going towards Baker City?
Oh, somebody's pulled up the routes. So as part of the roadshow, they will go into this in detail. So with the drivers, they have quite a number of hours of training. They have certain speeds that they're required to maintain. There is no road closures, but there are periods of times based on, I believe, inputs from the states where they are only allowed to travel through certain sections at certain time of the day. That's the description that's been given to me.
I know in Oregon, it's nothing after dark, only in daylight hours. And I'm assuming that's what you'll be following.
Right, they will be following the agreements that are currently in place, yes.
Okay, now my last question, then I'll let somebody else ask. How about, have you factored in inclement weather? Because like right now it's sunshiny, but I also know that it's snowing. I'm driving to Alawa tomorrow, and I also know it's snowing a part of the road that I will be driving on.
Yes, absolutely. So the weather impacts, if we're loading outdoors, it impacts our ability to even load the shipments. And then they do look at the routes that will be traveled, and they do take that into account. They're constantly monitoring the weather, and as need be, they will pull off at approved designated locations on the route if, weather comes along that they shouldn't be traveling in.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Kelly, historically, have there been any accidents or incidents involving true shipments while they're en route?
I'm not the right person to answer that question, none that I'm aware of myself.
Can you maybe describe the purpose of the flame gas array test?
The flame gas monitoring, it's the air sampling to make sure that to analyze what gases may be in the headspace, and there's certain requirements associated with that.
Mia Burke.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation, Kelly. I noticed that the date you have for Carlsbad Field Office to coordinate with tribes and states is August of 2027, which seems late to me if you're trying to get shipments started potentially even as soon as fiscal year 2027. Would that date be moving up if you were starting shipments earlier?
Yeah, so it'll, we have been keeping them up to speed on where we're at with the activities. And so the Carlsbad Field Office is not only running the CCP program, but they are also performing the outreach for the route. So it'll be essentially what they told us when they met with us last year. It'll be 1 year ahead of that. So we'll keep them informed.
Okay. And then who decides what the routes are between Hanford and WIP? Who makes that designation?
Those are all negotiated with the states. And so those routes have been negotiated years ago and are maintained. If there's any changes requested, then they have to work directly with the states.
Okay.
Can I interject just 1 minute, Chair?
Please.
Sure. Mia, if you remember my presentation back in November talking about the routes, the 11 Western states, which are administered through Western Interstate Energy Board, have negotiated with DOE what the routes are going to be on the way to WIP. So that map that just came up briefly was the one that has been previously negotiated with DOE through WEB, previously with Western Governors Association for those designated routes. So we have the, if you remember me talking about the WIP PIG, the program implementation guide. So we have that pre-plan already in place, which we'll be working with Carlsbad Field Office and the other states as Oregon gets ready for the resumption of that. So it'll go south on 82, it'll at 84. We'll have level 6 inspectors. We'll have the first responder community trained, all of that. So we are in close coordination, not only with Hanford, but also with CBFO on that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Kelly, who owns the waste once it leaves Hanford? Is it turned over at the site boundary to Carlsbad, or do they take quote unquote control of it when it shows up at Carlsbad? Who owns the transportation in the Department of Energy?
Carlsbad owns the transportation.
Okay.
We still own the waste because, you know, if it shows up down there and then they go to survey the container and they find contamination, they would send it back up to us. So we still have some responsibility, but from the shipping side of things, they take responsibility when they leave the site.
Who is the primary regulator? Is it EPA, Ecology, Oregon DEQ, or the states? How does all that come together?
It follows the DOT requirements. I don't think I can adequately answer that question for you.
Okay, Rep. Levy, you've got a question?
Well, Jeff and Mia, you both asked some questions that further makes me want to ask questions, so it's your fault. So the first one is tribal membership. C2IR is my tribe, and I have a historic relationship with them in that I've been working with the tribes, my husband and I, and all of our county has been working with them for over 40 years on water issues and clean water and first foods. And so first and foremost, my first foods part for the tribal members is incredibly important to me that that's protected. And I know that they have felt in the nuclear bills that I have been pushing forward that they have not been adequately looped into the conversation. And so I want to make sure that whoever, if you're talking to the governor's tribal liaison, that we also encourage, she is also a Confederated tribal member, thank goodness, that we have a better conversation with them and so that they understand that. And then the next question I had was, Jeff, you talked about waste and ownership. And Kelly, you said that once it gets there, and if they find out that it has something that they don't like, they give it back to us and we have to take it back. So have we accounted for the fact that if once it gets there, it doesn't pass their muster, and then we have to turn around and bring it back? Doesn't that cause a problem along the back route to go back? Mouthful, sorry.
So I don't expect that to be an issue, but I do know that obviously right now there's other shippers across the complex who have shipped to WIP. And there has been, at least one field office that had sent something, but it's very rare. And so if the contractor is following their processes and procedures, they're doing the smears, they're ensuring the containers are closed appropriately. And I don't expect to have an issue when that shipment shows up to WIP. That's part of the PSR process that we use, or the readiness that we use as we prepare for each of these activities, is to ensure all of that appropriate training and procedures are in place to make sure it's handled properly and that there are no issues that we create for WIP.
Allison?
Thank you for your presentation, Kelly. I'm curious if you have any further details on what a roadshow or other public outreach programs might look like.
With the roadshow, they would generally bring up the transporters with the true packed shipping containers on it. And so it would be something that folks can look at and put their eye on. So the Carlsbad field office, they have one individual, James Mason, and he's actually responsible for the whole program. And so he's the one that will work with the interested parties to see what would meet their needs and what they can offer.
Let me interject again here real quick, Mr. Chair, and Eddie, we'll get to you in just a sec. So we're going to talk about the road show that's going to be planned for Oregon in August later on in the meeting, but that is in coordination. And then Eddie's been patient and had his hand up for a bit. Did you want to go ahead, Eddie?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer some clarification. So the slide had noted August of 2027, but I think we're going to have our initial engagement in August of 2026. So that might have been a typo. And I'll also note that Washington State and Oregon and other state representatives along the route are engaging with the Carlsbad field office already through the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant Transportation Advisory Group. So we are having engagements with Carlsbad field office already. So just wanted to offer that clarification.
Max, go ahead.
Thanks, Eddie.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Max Woods here with the Department of Energy. I got a couple questions, but first, just to Rep. Levy's point about the CTUIR, just to be clear, we do coordinate with our counterparts at CTUIR government, particularly emergency management, sheriff, fire department there for safety training on a host of things. So I feel like we're in a pretty good place with them, and we can always do better, but making sure that they're in the loop is really important for us. Kelly, I wanted to ask you a question. This is maybe just more fundamental so people understand what we're talking. Could you describe what exactly true waste is? Again, you gave it at the very beginning, but like, what are some examples of true waste? I think that would be helpful for people to know. And number two, can you talk about how long the shipping campaign will take? How much material has to be moved off of the Hanford site to WIP, and how many years will that take? So we all have sort of that common understanding.
Okay, I'll start with the first question. So examples, as I mentioned, it's solid waste that's been contaminated with 100 nanocuries or more of the alpha emitting transuranic isotope. So it's things like maybe PPE that we used, or components that came out of the demo work that we've done out on site, whether it's sections of piping, pieces of glove boxes, anything that contain that type of material that we weren't able to decontaminate and still meets the definition that we have. And then also For shipping number of years, the number of years is based on the projected timeframe for WIP, which is they're projected to be operating until 2050. A lot of it is just based on budget, and so each of the activities that we're going to need to perform, like excavating the retrievably stored waste, that's all work that we're planning for in the future. So we have not only contact handled waste and RH waste that needs to be repackaged before we can send it down to WIP. So that's some of the challenges that we have. So right now we have Permafix in town doing our contact handled waste repackaging for some of the larger boxes that we had out there at CWC. And they'll continue to do that for several years in the future. And we're also working to basically introduce those capabilities back to Hanford. So right now we are working with the contractor to potentially install some Permacon enclosures at CWC that would allow us to open some of those contact handled containers to remove prohibitive items or any other treatment that needs to be done to make it ready to send a WIP.
And just for clear, thanks, Kelly. For board's awareness, contact handled meaning people can touch it, that it's safe enough for people. And RH, you said RH, that's remote handled, meaning it's too dangerous for people to get close to it. Is that right?
Essentially, yes. Yes.
Yeah, in my sort of simple mind. This is overwhelmingly solid material, and Tom dropped a picture there in the chat of kind of a cut of what I think some of the packaging looks like. But in my mind, it's always a wide range of materials. Some that's lower level of radioactivity, some that's pretty hot. So it's kind of a wide range. And maybe just while I'm talking here before we get on to the next topic, I think it's important for all of us on the Oregon board to keep in mind that the true waste stream is just one of the waste stream. This is not tank waste. This is something else entirely. But when you look at the cumulative shipments of waste from Hanford to places elsewhere in our nation, likely going through Oregon, that's really where we're sort of making sure that we are, in close coordination and sort of making sure we're doing our best to protect Oregonians and our environment is sort of that cumulative impact of multiple years or decades even of shipping of waste streams, true waste, tank waste, this other that we just heard about a new waste stream coming out of the DF Law facility. So like a lot of material that's likely going to be shipped through our state. High volume every week, a lot of it. So that's kind of where we're thinking. So true waste doesn't exist in isolation in our transportation mind. It's sort of part of all the other things that are going to be shipped through Oregon. That's a statement, not a question. Thank you, Kelly, for bearing with me here. All right, back to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Max, for that perspective. Esteban, you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Jeff. Very good morning, Kelly. Well, I'm glad there's a lot of stuff happening and everything, but I think the big thing, and to me, the big, as a conflict analyst that arises and things going on with worker rights and safety and, how things been, is there anything being done to keeping tabs or trainings and everything, when it comes to all this work that's happening, especially, there at the Hanford site?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has to go through training in order to perform their role out here.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments before we move on to the next DOE topic? Okay, I believe that's Ricky Bang. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Ricky Bang here.
Can you see the slides okay?
It's still loading, I believe. All right, Mark, I believe the slides have just loaded. Again, good morning, everyone. My name is Ricky Bang. I'm with the U.S. Department of Energy at the Hanford Field Office as the Deputy Assistant Manager for Tank Waste Operations. We can go on to the next slide. As Max Woods pointed out, there are several waste streams that are being considered for transportation from the Hanford site. And I'm here to talk about one of those activities and one of those other waste streams. And specifically, the waste stream I'm talking about today supports tank waste operations and is the subject of a current proposed permit modification that's out for public comment and subject of a upcoming public meeting. I'm here to really provide a couple additional details about the activity that may not have been included or not within that scope of the permit modification. Next slide. So we've been at the Hanford site, we've been operating the vitrification plant with radioactive waste since October 2025. We're ramping up operations and we've learned a lot about operating the VIT plant currently with radioactive waste. One of the things that we've learned and that we want to implement is with this byproduct, the secondary waste that we're producing as a result of vitrification operations, is we want to implement a load out, grouting, and disposal of a byproduct of the vitrification process and dispose of it outside the state of Washington. This byproduct is really a concentrate that's generated as a result of vitrification operations. And the way I'll describe it is the melters produce a hot gas. So while you have a molten pool of glass with the tank waste, it produces a secondary stream of hot gas. We'll call that off gas. It's that we treat, that we cool, and that we capture. And so what we are talking about is that clean water, that salt water that we use for cooling, treating, capturing, that melter, off gas, that hot gas, that's what we're talking about, is that water that we have used to cool, treat, and capture that melter off gas, and then that we then concentrate. And so as we've previously evaluated and considered the option to grout, transport, and dispose of this byproduct offsite, we've learned enough through melt law vitrification operations to be able to implement this option in order to optimize vitrification operations. We think by doing this, we would be able to produce more glass, get more tank waste incorporated into that glass. And so as a result, we've submitted a permit modification to the state of Washington, Department of Ecology, and a 60-day public comment period was launched on that permit modification.
Ricky, I'm going to pause for 1 sec. Thank you, Rick. This is great. But Mark, can you try taking the slides down and then put them back up? Some folks aren't seeing the slides. I see them. Some people are not seeing them. Mark, maybe just disconnect and then try again. Sorry to pause, Ricky.
Hey, no worries.
Yeah,
it's a good time to pause and make sure folks can see the slides.
Yeah, no, this is good. Let's try this again.
And thanks for monitoring the chat. Hard to do.
All right, it's back up on my screen. How are we thinking? Allison gives a thumbs up. Liz says yes. Okay. Ricky, please proceed. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, we'll continue with the next slide as I'll talk a bit more about what we're planning on doing. And so, we talk about why we're doing this and folks can kind of see the benefits of what this does, but just to give a bit of background, what is Hanford tank waste cleanup? And so what we do at the Hanford site with tank waste is we retrieve the tank waste that's stored. We treat that tank waste by removing radionuclides, and we send that pre-treated waste after the radionuclides have been removed, or most of the radionuclides have been removed, and then we send that pre-treated waste to the WTP low activity waste vitrification facility to make glass with that tank waste. And we really want the most amount of tank waste in the glass as possible, right? That's the mission that we have. And we've done a lot in order to figure out how to get the most tank waste into glass. And this EMF concentrate byproduct action that we want to take is one of those ways to get more tank waste into the glass. So path one for this byproduct, that water that was used to cool, capture, and treat the hot off gas. What we would normally do is send it back to the melter, what we call a recycle, right? That clean salt water that we use to cool, treat, capture that gas, we would normally send that back to the melter. So if I send this water to the melter, what can't I send to the melter? Tank waste, right? So by having a second path for this byproduct, and instead of sending the secondary wastewater, the byproduct, to the melter, instead I can then send more tank waste to the melter. More tank waste in glass results in more tank space upstream. More tank space means more tank waste retrievals upstream. So by using this grout for the byproduct, by transporting it and disposing it outside the state of Washington off the Hanford site, we can make more glass with the tank waste that we've retrieved and treated. And that's really the benefit of what we're trying to do with this activity. And I'll get into how we are going to implement this activity in the upcoming slides. So next slide. So how do we plan to implement this, or how are we proposing to implement this? And so at the WTP, low activity waste vitrification facility, we have storage tanks for this byproduct, this EMF concentrate secondary wastewater. We will sample each tank that's full of that secondary wastewater, that byproduct. So we will know what's in that water before we decide to grout it, transport it, and dispose of it. And we will know and ensure that it meets the waste acceptance criteria for the disposal facilities. And currently that disposal facility would be Energy Solutions in Clive, Utah. And based on the last 5 months of operations at the WTP, we are way, way below the waste acceptance criteria for those disposal facilities. Couple of orders, at least one order of magnitude below what we anticipated seeing in the byproduct. We will meet all DOT requirements for transportation, shipping, training for this byproduct. We have, experience with other shipments. We do shipments of secondary waste today to Perma-Fix Northwest and back to the site. We've done and coordinated shipments in the past as well. So we have some recent experience in doing this, and we'll ensure that we comply with all the rules, requirements, and regulations for the shipment. And on the next slide, I'll get into a little bit more detail about what we're doing with the shipment. And so I've talked about how this byproduct is secondary wastewater. It's water that we've used to cool, treat, capture the hot off gas from our vitrification plant melters. Based on what we think it will be best, we will grout this byproduct at Perma-Fix Northwest. We will load it out from the WTP vitrification facility into a tanker truck of some sort or a container that will be loaded onto a truck. It will be driven, I forget, like 8 or 9 miles into Perma-Fix Northwest, just outside of Richland for grouting. And then the grouted material will be inside of a shipping container, similar to what you see here, DOT rated, industrial packaging level 2, basically a steel inside of a steel container before it is shipped. Shipment may be about 7,500 gallons a month based on the permit modification that we've proposed. Based on the sample results that we've seen, we think the radiation levels from the Hanford site to Richland would be about half a millirem. And so half a millirem would be equivalent to getting an X-ray at the dentist's office, approximately. That's the level of hazard that you may see at the container. After it's been grouted and treated at Perma-Fix Northwest, we expect the radiation levels to drop significantly to near zero outside of the container before it's shipped. And so really, I'm not sure we'll be able to detect anything after it's grouted and then placed in its shipping container for shipment to the disposal facility in Clive, Utah. Next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the transportation company or the shipment itself. We're really taking the lessons learned that we've had with the test bed initiative where we shipped treated tank waste. This byproduct is not tank waste. It is secondary waste. It is a byproduct, secondary wastewater. But we're taking those lessons learned that we have with tank waste, with test bed initiative, and we're applying it to this transportation of secondary waste. The byproduct that we've used to cool, capture, treat the hot gas from the melters. We're using an experienced transportation company. It's been in business since I think the 70s, if I recall correctly. They do well over 8-10 million miles a year safely. You can find their DOT records on the internet. Last 2 years, no accidents or injuries. Drivers with 20 plus years of experience, solid transportation vehicles and protocols when handling all of their shipments as well. So it's going to be a good process from loading out at the Hanford site to grouting it at Perma-Fix Northwest to disposing of it at Clive, Utah at the Energy Solutions facility. We have had early discussions with the Department of Radioactive Waste Management in Utah so that they are aware that this would be going to them. We do maintain our contacts with the State Department of Transportations with each site along the transportation path. We also did brief at the emergency responders meeting at the Franklin County ECC and all the attendees there about this activity as well. And we'll continue to reach out and do any communications needed along the transportation path, especially as we get closer. Well, once we do get a permit and we get closer to a shipment date. On the next slide, and I believe it's the last slide, just to note that, again, we are in the middle of the 60-day public comment period for the permit modification that we've proposed for this activity. It runs for about another 5 weeks through April 26. I will encourage anyone to provide their comments on the permit modification. And also a public meeting is scheduled for a week from today at the Richland Public Library. I encourage anyone to attend that public meeting as well for more specific details about the permit modification. I believe that's the end of the slide deck. and I can take any questions.
Okay,
start.
thank you, Ricky. I think, at least I view this as a very positive development. And would kick this off by asking one question. Why Clive, Utah, or why out of state? Why wouldn't this go into one of the landfills at Hanford?
Yeah, that is something for the out of state, Jeff. That was something that we worked with the Washington Department of Ecology on, consistent with a lot of what we've done with disposal of grouted material. And so I think in the permit modification, you'll see one of the conditions was disposal outside the state of Washington. And then what was the first question again? The first half of your question?
Yeah, no, that was really the question. So let's see if we can move to, we have a series of people lined up with questions. I think Esteban, I saw you first.
Yes, thank you. So let me get this straight. If I heard it correctly. So in order to treat the waste, you're producing more waste, and then you're shipping it to another site in Utah, because the organization I know who's in Utah who advocates for informing the public of this waste hazards. I mean, so basically, I mean, it's just even the treatment of all this nuclear waste is just producing mass amounts of waste. And I mean, is that part of the whole permitting and public sessions and everything that's happening?
It has been, yes, I think I do understand the concern that, as part of the process to treat and solidify the tank waste, it produces a lot of secondary waste. And, there's a lot of, steps as part of the process. So with the treatment process itself, we remove a lot of those key radionuclides on ion exchange media upstream of vitrification. And so we remove a lot of the risk and hazard, and we store it on our ion exchange resin, stored in ion exchange stainless steel columns on a concrete pad. We send pre-treated material to be vitrified in glass. The glass stays on the Hanford site. And so what we're talking about now is a lot of the secondary wastewater that's part of operations of a nuclear facility, of a vitrification facility. And so we're taking every steps that we can to concentrate, right? So we're minimizing the volume of secondary waste that we have to treat. And then we are taking the steps to ensure that it's grouted appropriately and disposed of at the facilities that have a permit and license that can take this material.
Thank you, Ricky. Since an issue just came up involving, this is kind of an ecology decision to ship it out of state. Suzanne Dahl, you had a comment. You're from ecology.
Yes, I could add ecology's perspective on that. So there's two paths in the permit for this waste that comes from the scrubbers that are on top of the melters. Initially, it goes to this system that does evaporation that concentrates it. And there's two pathways outlined in the permit. There used to be one pathway outlined in the permit, and the proposed permit modification adds a second pathway. The one pathway that existed in the permit before was that waste continued to be recycled past the melters multiple times, so that you could get as many of the key constituents and key risk drivers caught up into the glass. And so the more you recycled, the more you got it caught up in the glass. And so that helped the risk assessment out for the integrated disposal landfill. And so it's long been a requirement in the permit that waste stream be recycled multiple times, so that you get most of those long-lived mobile drivers of risk into the glass, which is a much more durable waste. When Department of Energy came to us and proposed this option of perhaps grouting some of this waste and sending it off site, it became an acceptable option to us because it wouldn't, that grouted waste form that would have those long-lived mobile constituents wouldn't be in the integrated disposal facility landfill above the aquifer at Hanford, and would go to other disposal sites that have much more robust geology underneath them that make them more suitable for being the future disposal sites of those long-lived mobiles. So the permit maintains both pathways. If it stays on site, it has to be recycled and vitrified. If it's grouted, it has to go off site to a disposal site that is much more is much more attuned to being able to keep that waste away from associated groundwaters and other recipients.
Thank you, Susan. Stephen Bedrick?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the great presentation there. I just have a couple of questions. You mentioned that the EMF is way below the levels of radioactivity that you were expecting. You said a couple orders of magnitude even. What's up with that? Does that mean that the initial models were wrong, or is there a deviation of the process or the assay method that is maybe undercounting, or there's things we're not expecting? That seems like a very large deviation from what you guys were initially expecting. I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think great question about why we're seeing lower results than anticipated. And I think we made conservative assumptions with the models to ensure that we built a plant that was safe for operations. And so based on the sample results, the equipment, the melters are operating better than expected. The long-lived radionuclides and other radionuclides and hazards aren't showing up in the wastewater that's anticipated. So we're now, based on actual sample results and operational data, we're confident about the grouting path that we want to take with this material.
And do we anticipate that they'll be stable? And my understanding is that there's various sources that are going into the law facility as time goes on, getting from tank to tank to tank, et cetera. So will the next tank that you guys crack open maybe be at a different level and go back to the original planned levels of stuff being caught up in the EMF? Could it just be an artifact of the particular tank you're getting into, I guess, is what I'm wondering.
I think until we process more and get more data, can't answer that definitively, but I think the approach that we're taking right now is that we are going to take samples before we make a decision on which path that we take. I think as Suzanne mentioned, right, there are two pathways for this. And so where we are confident in the sample results and that they allow us to meet the waste acceptance criteria for those disposal facilities, then we think those batches that we have at WTP would be appropriate for grouting and then offsite disposal and transport.
Okay. And then I won't hog my time. I just have one last question for you. You said something about estimating about 7,500 gallons of the concentrated off-gas stuff per month. About what does that turn into in terms of containers and shipments per month after it goes to the grouting? Because I imagine the volume is not one-to-one. So what does that turn into?
I'd probably estimate it about 2 or 3 containers, 2 or 3 trucks.
Cool, thank you. I'll leave time for others to ask. I could ask questions all day, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, we're going to do Mia Burke, then Mike Freeman, then Matt Hendrickson, and Allison. So that's the queue. Mia.
Hi, thanks, Ricky. I find it a little misleading to call this wastewater. It's my understanding that it has some tech and iodine in it. Is that the case? And what other radionuclides, chemicals are in this waste, not water?
No, it's 2 different things, right? So in the off-gas treatment system, that's where the scrubber or the WESP will have the water. That's the clean water. After it's treated, that hot off gas, it may still contain things like those radionuclides, and maybe some other chemicals. But based on sample results that we've taken so far, what have we seen in it? I don't recall. I think actually the chemical hazards are a bit lower. I don't know if there was tech. There might have been iodine, but I'd have to get back to you, Mia.
Okay. So, you talked about this allowing you to make more glass with
Yes.
Directly with tank waste. I'm curious if this change actually increases the throughput at law to make more glass, or is that throughput just not slowed down because the off-gas liquids aren't going back through law and they're not slowing down the process, if that makes sense?
Yes. Let me try to answer your question based on what I know, and let me know if I'm answering your question. And so, will this process actually increase the throughput of the WTP law facility?
Yeah.
And to us, the answer is yes, by 10 to 20%, right? Because again, the first option that we have, the only option that we have today, is to send the water back to the melters. And so if I can take, 87,000 gallons a year to grout and dispose off site, that's 87,000 gallons more of tank waste that I could put into the melter. And the more wastewater that I don't have to put into the melters, the even more waste I can put in the melters.
Okay, so there's been a lot of talk of the law facility not having the capacity to treat all of Hanford's tank waste. So by doing this, do you see a future where the law facility could treat the Hanford's tank waste, the low activity portion?
Honestly, no. Just because of the volume of tank waste at Hanford, I think this gives us a step into getting closer. It allows us to do more TSCR operations today, for example. Because TSCR operations is paused currently because we're out of double shell tank space until WTP ramps up enough to its design throughput so that we can continue to operate TSCR. It allows us to do more tank waste retrievals because it's less water in the system. So I would say from the big picture mission, I think the answer is no. I think this is a step of getting 10 or 20% closer in accelerating that tank waste mission.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike Freeman.
It's been touched on a couple times already, but the concern here is for our old buddy technetium that has a very unfortunate half-life, meaning that it will be radioactive millennia from now, and it also forms volatile oxides and so is volatilized in the unit. And grout isn't always, experiments so far indicate that there isn't as complete a sequestration by grout as there is by glass, which is why you don't want to put it into the Hanford Plateau. What's the long-term view on filling up Utah with technetium?
Can you ask the question again to make sure I understand your concern with technetium and sending it to Utah specifically?
Technetium because of its ability to shift valence states, is not as securely sequestered in grout as, say, strontium or other elements are. And of course, it's got that 99,000 year half-life, which means that the level of radiation doesn't drop appreciably over 1,000 years. And so the fact that this can't be kept in glass and put into a geologic storage and instead is put into grout and shipped to Utah, what is the prospect for technetium in Utah over millennia? Suzanne Dahl has made a comment here that and she was clearly concerned, and she clearly addressed it in her comment, and I think she's given me the answer that I'm asking in general. But there is still this burden on us as a group to make that consideration. Are we doing something that's, should climate change dramatically change the aquatic environment in this part of the world, are we sowing seeds of our own destruction? So with that, I'll consider myself answered.
All right, okay. And thank you, Suzanne. I don't think I could have spoke for the state of Utah.
Yeah, I think we could consider that a comment rather than a question, but yeah, thanks, Mike. Allison.
Thanks for your presentation, Ricky. I have a question about transportation vehicles that are used to transport the waste to the grouting facility. You mentioned that workers or transporters would experience a small dose of radiation, millirems per hour equivalent to an X-ray. I'm wondering if that number is a maximum or an average. If it's an average, do you have an understanding of what the maximum could be? And then my second question is, does that waste have an ability to contaminate the transportation vessel and vehicle that's used for it over and over again over time?
Okay, good question. And so, the 0.5 millirem estimate is based on the samples that we have to date. And I would probably put that as a max based on the sample data that we have to date. The reality could be lower depending on the vehicle and container that ends up being used. I don't have a max. I don't have a max right now. We could try to calculate it based on the theoretical limit. As I think Stephen had asked about the modeling results. So it may be slightly higher. But today we just don't know. I did have to try to go back and find some of the sample data to Mia's question. And I think based on the data, there is some, tech in the sample results, but they're about 2 or 3 orders of magnitude below what we had measured. And I don't think there's any cesium or strontium, which has all been removed by our treatment processes. So Allison, sorry, long way to answer your question, which is 0.5 is based on the sample data that we have to date. I don't have a max right now.
Okay, we have time for one more quick question. We saved the best for last. Matt Hendrickson.
No, I will defer to Allison. She seemed to have one more question. I do have something that I would like to have both ecology and Ricky comment on. Within the permit conditions themselves, it doesn't specify that this waste has to be solidified before it leaves the state. There is nothing in the permit conditions that forces them to use Permafix to solidify this material before it leaves. Can it potentially be shipped off-site? I would be shocked if it didn't have tech and iodine in it, or else, why bother having it leave the facility and not use up the risk budget there in Richland? But I am curious about the permit conditions and the remainder of my time to Allison.
Yeah, I'll start and maybe let Suzanne finish. Let's see, Matt, I think you're correct. There are some radionuclides that's in the EMF concentrate. We do plan on grouting the material at Permafix Northwest. And you're right, it is not a permit condition that we do that. I think based on the feedback that we've gotten on the testbed initiative, on West area, on holistic, we've decided that this was a best practice that we want to do with the EMF concentrated byproduct.
Okay. Ricky and Kelly, thank you very much for your presentations. I think a lot of good work. So we appreciate your updates today. And now would like to segue over to the Washington Department of Ecology. I think Ryan Miller and Eddie Holbrook. Take it away.
Yeah, Eddie, do you want to kick us off the first couple slides?
Yeah, just want to thank everyone for having ecology here today. Really appreciate the time. We'll have a few updates on budget, outreach, as well as project updates, public involvement activities, and then the Hanford site-wide permit update as well. Next slide.
All right, well, I think it goes back to me. So just to update folks on our outreach and education work that we always love to highlight, it's been a super busy time. I think the last time we met with the OHCB more and presented to you guys was in the fall time. So since then, we've reached over 1,100 folks. We've been doing a lot more rural outreach in communities in Columbia and like Okanagan counties. Been doing just a ton of different events, a lot of which we don't even have listed on the slide. Like for example, I know my team's been out in the field a lot the last couple weeks, and they're actually doing like weekly visits to middle school here in Tri-Cities over the next 5 or 6 weeks. So they're super busy with our education outreach. We also recently issued our TPA public involvement survey. It's the annual survey that Ecology puts out on behalf of all the 3 agencies to kind of gauge the public's thoughts on how the agencies did with public involvement over the last calendar year. And we recently concluded this year's survey, and we're working on kind of the report for it. And happy to share that we reached a record amount of folks. We actually had over 255 responses this year, which is awesome. We had like, I think 80 or so last year, like 220 the year before. So we're really good to see that number kind of spike up again and get some responses from folks we haven't heard from before. But so just kind of recapping 2025, we had about 5,000 people that we reached with our outreach and education work, presented on a wide variety of topics, like groundwater cleanup, natural resources, Hanford site updates, cleanup, habitat, wildlife, those sorts of things. We've got a lot of different STEM fairs and career days coming up. We're getting back into doing like Rotary clubs and civic organizations, and we're doing a whole lot of stuff for Earth Month. At the Earth Day event at the Reach Museum and a bunch of other events that some of which are highlighted on the slides. So just throwing the pitch out there if anybody's ever interested in having us come talk to you guys, and we can do it virtually with your group too. It doesn't have to be in person. Then just contact the email on the list there, and we're always happy to come and talk to your group. In the world of Hanford site budget. Some of you may have seen the news, but a month or so ago, Congress passed its fiscal year 2026 appropriation for Hanford site cleanup, which was a record number. It came out to about $3.35 billion for this fiscal year, which is really exciting. It was a record high in funding. That being said, Ecology estimated that a compliant budget, which a compliant budget means it's the budget that would allow energy to stay on track and meet its cleanup milestones. That we estimated that number was 6.15 billion was needed for FY 2026, and we calculate our compliant budget number using Department of Energy's life cycle scope cost and schedule report. They most recently issued the most recent version of that report last year in 2025, and that report gets issued every 3 years. So I do want to recognize, while the budget falls short, it does represent, really great progress and continuing to increase funding and really great support from our congressional delegation. including the leadership of Patty Murray. So we really appreciate Congress's support and advocating for Hanford funding. We're already hard at work advocating for FY27's budget, so meeting with congressional offices and committees and talking about why Hanford's important and why, a compliant budget is needed to keep cleanup on track and get cleanup accomplished in a more timely fashion. And just for quick stats, we kind of estimate that 6.76 billion is needed in FY27 and 6.65 billion is needed in FY28. And these higher numbers represent a lot of capital projects and crucial work happening at the site, including, the vitrification plant that just started up, ongoing work at the high level waste facility, resumption of transuranic waste, all kinds of other big projects happening out at the site. So really crucial that we get some higher levels of funding. We continue to advocate for funding, and Liz already beat me to the punch in the chat. We've got a one pager that we put out and that we update regularly that has got a lot of really great information, including this graphic that talks about the last couple of years of funding on what was proposed by the presidential administration, what was passed by Congress, what a compliant number is. And we just recently updated that with the latest and greatest numbers, as of a couple, month or so ago, and we'll update it again once we get the next president's budget, hopefully here soon. So thanks for sharing that in the chat, Liz. But with that, I think I'll kick it back to Eddie to talk about milestones.
Yeah, so coming off of the holistic agreement, which was finalized in January of 2025, there was a need to look at some other milestone series under the tri-party agreement to align those with some of the new timelines identified under the holistic agreement changes and milestones. So the milestones that were updated in negotiations between Ecology, EPA, and Energy were the M15 series, the M16 series, and the M85 series. The agencies proposed a new milestone series to consolidate these three, known as M100. Tri-parties concluded a public comment period. Let me see here, apologies. So we had concluded the public comment period for these proposed milestone changes. We had also completed tribal consultations in February and March. And then the tri-parties are working on responding to comments and are looking to have our responses ready by April of 2026. All right, so a lot about DF law this morning, but just wanted to provide some updates and some context here. So hot commissioning was completed at Direct Feed Low Activity Waste Facility on October 15, 2025. As of February, more than 140 metric tons of glass had been poured, including more than 50,000 gallons of treated tank waste in 34 containers. Many of those containers have been transferred over to the integrated disposal facility, another landfill that you've heard about here today, and they are currently sitting on a storage pad at the facility. They're looking to build up the capacity of containers that they have at IDF before they dispose of it in the landfill. Energy continues to wrap up production. And, a little bit was talked about, the efficiency gains that will occur over the next year or two when it comes to the waste treatment plant. So we look forward to seeing the capacity increase at the waste treatment plant as they work through producing more glass over the next couple of months here. Suzanne, I'll stop right there. Do you have any other points you wanted to add to this particular slide?
No, I get you did a great job. I think I would add that, remind everybody that it's a complex facility, relatively one of a kind, and in its size and other components, and that it takes a bit to work out how everything works together and to get all the systems working smoothly. It's doing a good job, but there's things that are worked on. This week, actually last week and the beginning part of this week is doing a great job of pouring glass and turning waste into glass.
All right, thanks, Suzanne. All right, so we had a whole presentation on this, but we'll just provide a little putt here for it as well. So the 60-day public comment period has started on February 25th. There is that public meeting that Ricky had mentioned on March 24th. That will be USDOE lead. Comment period involves the proposed modifications on the Hanford site associated with the effluent management facility and WTP as a whole. Once the comment period is concluded, Ecology will respond to comments and make a final permit decision on what Ricky had presented on earlier. Anything else you want to add there, Suzanne?
Nope, I think we're good.
All right. All right. Tank waste treatment's been really busy. As Suzanne had mentioned, there's quite a few projects he's responsible for. And one of those also includes the West Area Risk Mitigation Management Project. Energy was to make a decision on December 31st, 2025, associated with alternative treatment in the West area. So WTP sits in the East area of the 200 area. And then this work that we're discussing here is related to the holistic agreement and the West area tank farms. That decision was extended to July 1st, 2026. So we do anticipate Energy to make a decision by then. Ecology and Energy are discussing permit needs, and part of us deciding on the permit needs for the site, we need this decision to be made as well. Energy also started the public comment period for the waste incidental reprocessing evaluation, and that's out for public comment until March 26.
One quick note, I apologize. I think I had a typo on the slide. The overall project in the West area is called the West Area Tank Treatment. And WARM is part of that. WARM's largely the pre-treatment kind of stuff out there. So I just wanted to make that distinction. So sorry for the typo.
Yeah, I don't think it was even a typo. I think the name keeps on changing at this point, so we'll utilize both those names. They work just well. Something else happening on the Hanford site that's really exciting right now, the moving of the cesium and strontium capsules at the waste encapsulation storage facility. Energy began moving capsules from wet storage, which was in the pools at WESIF, to dry storage in early November of 2025. Ecology permits and oversees this project as well. Last time I heard, I believe 2 capsules were filled and then put on the dry storage pad at this moment. So just to reiterate, there are a number of public involvement opportunities right now. We did mention the waste incidental reprocessing that Energy had put out. Also, the Class 2 public comment period for the effluent management facility concentrate that Ricky had presented on. That does have that public meeting opportunity on March 24th at the Richland Public Library. And then also a air permitting waste treatment plant notice of construction. That public comment period started on February 20th and runs through March 22nd. I believe, March 22nd of 2026. All right, and finally here, just wanted to provide an update for the Hanford site-wide permit. It certainly has been a long time coming. We have ended workshops with Department of Energy to address any deficiencies with the permit for the site-wide permit. Ecology is working through their final actions to prepare for the public comment period. We are aiming for June 29th of 2026, and we will conduct a 120-day public comment period for the site-wide permit. There will be several informational meetings along the way, starting prior to the public comment period and throughout the public comment period. We will also have public hearings and are looking to get those scheduled here in the near future. So more to come about the site-wide permit public comment period here soon. Just wanted to give some context about the Hanford site-wide permit. So it does include 52 operating closure and post-closure unit groups. It does include corrective action addenda associated with it. It will have standard conditions like every dangerous waste permit has, and attachments and supporting documents will be available as well.
And I can hop in a little bit real quick on the public involvement side, Eddie, just to share a little bit more about some of that information. So first off, I want to say thanks to the OHCB. I know we've been talking a lot about the permit the last couple of years and some of the public involvement planning that we've been planning, and really appreciate the feedback that we've heard from both you guys and the Hanford Advisory Board. So like Eddie said, we're planning a variety of informational meetings and public hearings, and we'll be holding, we're tentatively planning some informational meetings / public hearing kind of hybrid meetings later in the comment period in September that would include meetings in Richland, Portland, Seattle, Pendleton / Umatilla area, and then like an online only hearing. So we're still nailing down the details on exact dates and locations and all that stuff, but that's what we're tentatively looking at for later in the comment period. There will be some informational meetings early in the comment period too, and we're also planning like one before the comment period even starts to start help getting folks acquainted with the permit, and since it's a lot to kind of look at and navigate. We'll also be looking at doing some weekly lunch and learns starting in July that go for like 7 or 8 weeks, like every week on, I think we're aiming for like Wednesdays over the lunch hour that focuses on like a specific part of the permit, like a specific unit group or waste site or facility. So still kind of nailing down some specifics, but really appreciate the feedback we've been hearing so far, and that's some of what we're looking at so far. But my ask for the OHCB is if you guys have any suggestions on any low cost or free venues in the Portland area or over in like Pendleton, Umatilla, please feel free to email me. I can put my email in the chat, or just hanford@eci.wa.gov as we continue to track down kind of venues and locations for things where we're still kind of nailing down the finer details of some of the meeting locations. And then we'll be looking to launch our web page dedicated to the Hanford site-wide permit. We're targeting early April to launch the website page, and the website page will launch largely with just some general information about the permit. It'll include like our baseball cards that we've talked about with the board before, that's got some high level information about each of the sites. And as we get closer to the comment period, we'll populate the web page with more of the permit kind of information and links to where to find documents and all that stuff. But we'll be launching with a bit of an early version of it, I guess you could say, in early April. But that's all I kind of had to share on that front. I just wanted to share some additional kind of PI information as we get a little closer. But with that, Eddie, did you have anything else? Or I think that takes us to the end of our presentation.
It does.
Okay, well, happy to answer questions. Or Jeff, not sure if you wanted to go to EPA, but we're happy to take questions too.
Yeah, let's maybe take a few questions now for ecology. I'd like to start out, obviously, with a really softball, easy question for you. When are we going to build a grout plant on site? What's ecology's vision? Because if you're looking at ultimate tank closure and filling these tanks at some point with grout, what are we waiting for?
Yeah, so I think part of that is the decision that Department of Energy has to make on July 1st of 2026. So I don't have an exact answer for you as far as when or where, but as part of Department of Energy's decision that they have to make later this year on July 1st, we'll work with Department of Energy on any permitting that would be needed associated with the grout plant if they so choose to do it on the Hanford site.
So at this point in time, ecology does not have a position on grouting on site or building a grout plant on site?
We're focused on the waste treatment plant right now and ensuring that the startup of the waste treatment plant occurs accordingly and meets the objectives of the order that's associated, the court order associated with that, and the permit obligations of Department of Energy at this time.
Okay, thanks. Other questions, please? Mia Burke.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I have a question related to the EMF concentrate, and I'm just curious since it seems like a pretty quick thing that can start happening. I'm wondering, you receive comments, you respond to comments, you update the permit as needed. What other things are needed for that to actually start taking place and waste to be sent to Permafix, that EMF concentrate sent to Permafix and on to Clive, Utah? What schedule are you looking at there?
So one of the things that would need to happen, and it would happen before we issued the permit final after public comment, would be issuing a notice of adoption from a SEPA standpoint. So to be able to adopt the supplemental analysis that was done by the Department of Energy. But that would be done in concert with completing the permit. So really, timeline wise, it's completing the permit, and there's really not physical changes that have to happen in the field for this activity to occur, because there was already a loadout area in the effluent management facility.
Do you, and maybe this is probably more a question for Jeff Schramm, but a treatability variance, is that going to be needed as well for this waste to go off site?
So we talked about whether there was going to need to be a treatability variance, and because this waste is a new point of generation as the vitrification works, and as the off gas goes up to the top of the melter and off the top of the melter and goes into the scrubbers, and you introduce liquids in there to make sure that the scrubbers are doing the job, and then you take that waste over to the evaporator system at EMF. At that point, it's a new point of generation, and without getting into all the details in that, so they don't need to do a treatability variance in order to show that they're meeting the land disposal restrictions at the Permafix facility.
Okay, thank you.
Matt Hendrickson.
Well, I look forward to seeing some of these RCRA permit trading cards. I'm hoping to get myself a Suzanne Dahl rookie card in that mix if I could. Get that signed. But that's neither here nor there. Now, I noticed, at least with the EMF permit modifications, that the allowability, that about 7,500 gallons, or the 87,700, was just about right on what the original supplemental analysis for the secondary waste had for your group 3 material, approximately 332 cubic meters. What provisions, if anything, did Ecology make for the other group 3 material that was in the supplemental analysis? Because there were other materials like HEPA filters and such that were within that as well. It sounds like you might go over that allowable group 3 amount that was in the supplemental analysis for secondary waste.
Yeah, Matt, we might have to go through the math together on that. What we specifically restricted it to the allowable amount that was in supplemental analysis number 3, and to specifically what they were looking at as a possibility for breaking out the recycled waste to break in the case when they did the SA3, when they were looking at the halide reduction. So as far as the other question, you and I probably have to get together and go through the math on that. But there was an option to include a greater amount of EMF concentrate going to grouting and offsite disposal. And we took the option for now of restricting that in the permit to specifically what was analyzed in the SA3.
Jeff, you're muted.
Jeff, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you, Ecology. Are any other questions before we move on?
Jeff, I got a question if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, please.
Brian, can you pull back up for us, or maybe Mark, the budget slide? I think we should probably talk about that a little bit more.
Sure.
I got it's two questions. One's perhaps an easier one. Can you describe, Ryan, how the compliant budget is figured out? How do you estimate what a compliant budget means? I mean, I know what it means, but how do you come up with that number?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. My first answer is we have somebody on our staff who does all the math and calculations, and that's not me. But my understanding is the life cycle report does, it's got low ranges and high ranges, and we largely base our calculations off of the low ranges from the life cycle report that's outlined in that report. So obviously the numbers changed a little bit from, because we used to do our compliant budget number estimations off the 2022 life cycle report, and then when the new report came out last year, we kind of updated based off of the updated numbers in that report. But that's my understanding is we largely follow the lower range numbers in there.
And that life cycle report for the board it's DOE's own analysis, right? That's a DOE report that then you take a look at and use their number. So this isn't an ecology thing per se. This is a DOE.
Yeah, correct. It's the U.S. Department of Energy's report that they put out.
Right. Okay. Eddie, go ahead.
No, I think Ryan covered it quite well. The staff member does work within my section, the permitting, planning, and budget section, outside of the life cycle report. So just to kind of give a little context about what's compliant, right? So we do have the tri-party agreement. We have established milestones in there that they have to meet on any given fiscal year. So for them to stay on track with those milestones in conjunction with the analysis that Department of Energy does under the life cycle report, we utilize that numbers to establish the compliant budget.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. Anybody who's looking at the slide sees that red line going up and up. And I think if you went beyond 2028 or 29, you see it go up even sharper. I guess it just sort of begs the question that we talk about all the time on the Hanford budget side. What gives when you don't have a compliant budget? Like, what's the trade-off here? So a $3.35 billion budget is a record budget, but inflation eats up so much of that. And maybe this is just a rhetorical question that none of us can really answer, is, that budget shortfall, that gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger in the future. And I don't know if anybody actually thinks Hanford's ever going to get over $6 billion a year in appropriations from Congress in the next couple of years. Evidence does not prove that it will be the case. So what's going to change? What has to give, right? I mean, you either sort of push out the cleanup milestone just beyond and beyond and beyond, or something else has to change. Lowering that cost curve, or I don't know what else. Anyway, that's maybe, I don't know if I expect you to have an answer for that, Ryan or Eddie, but just maybe something people have to sort of reconcile with and contemplate what this means.
Yeah, well, it's a great point and a great question, and I can offer some insight. And Eddie, you can let me know if I'm on track or if you have any other perspective. But to the first part of your question, what happens when we don't get a compliant budget, which regularly happens? Every year that Hanford is underfunded, extends the overall life cycle of the mission. It increases the overall cost by billions of dollars, and also increases the environmental risk, right? Because every year that Hanford cleanup is extended, increases the risk, since you're not getting to stuff out there. So that's kind of the big three reasons, big three things that happen when Hanford funding is not compliantly funded. And that's obviously part of the messaging that we go out and share with our congressional representatives on what happens with Hanford funding. On the component of kind of how do we navigate this, because it's a regular problem, right? We get together with Energy, they they get together with us and they let us know when milestones are at risk of being missed, whether it be due to funding or other reasons. And we'll either, enter into negotiations with energy to either negotiate milestones, or, we reserve the right to enforce on milestones that are missed, if we can't reach agreement on milestones as well. But I know, we're constantly looking at ways to, accomplish cleanup in a way that meets milestones, is protective of human health and the environment. And I think there's some good examples today outlined of ways that energy and the agencies are always looking at ways to, use the most with the dollars that we have. So I think that's an ever happening conversation on kind of how do we navigate, the world, the reality that we're not going to likely be getting that fully compliant budget number. But Eddie, do you have anything additional to add, or or was I off base?
No, completely on base. And I saw Suzanne had her hand up. Not sure if she had anything to add as well.
Yes,
Well,
Susan.
and one of the things, I mean, it was mentioned, but one of the things that's driving the budget going up, besides what you were saying, is that in the nearer term, we have some ongoing capital construction, whether it's associated with the high level waste plant or the facilities that are needed to support the high level waste plant. Those construction dollars will exist for a period of time, and then not exist. But then you do have to have operational costs for the high level plant as well. And then there's also similar costs, not to the same extent, over on the west side in building those additional facilities. And I'm just looking at it through the lens of tank waste treatment. There's obviously other activities at the Hanford site as well.
Okay, Esteban, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. So this day of tight budgets, as Oregon and Washington knows, like you mentioned, Ryan, and I think with all the uptick in activity, I think during our Oregon Hanford cleanup waste visit, I can't remember the guy, but he said that, at that time it wasn't approved, the budget. But I mean, is that something also that you're informing the public and everybody, especially when it comes, the uptick on all nuclear waste proposals and everything that's happening? Because I mean, budgets, it's not going to get any cheaper to continue doing this work, of course, right?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what I said, that we're constantly, advocating, not, and honestly, not only for Hanford's budget, we're advocating that, all the cleanup sites get compliant budgets. And when we're talking to Congress, we're not saying we want a bigger piece of the environmental management pie. We want to take funding from other sites. No, that's not the case. We want funding to increase appropriately for all of the sites. We want the pie to be bigger for environmental management and be able to clean up all of the sites. So not just Hanford, but the other sites, because it's crucial that we, that we see the federal government clean up all of its obligations from, the Manhattan Project and the Cold War. So it's definitely a constant priority for us and other sites that we're out educating not only Congress but the public on too.
Okay, we've got one more comment or question from Mike Freeman, but we do need to, after this, segue over to US EPA and Jeff Schrum. So Mike, go ahead.
So how would you see the new emphasis on creating microreactors and private fuel reprocessing activities around the country affecting this money?
Eddie, you want to take a first go at that, or you want me to?
Yeah, I can take the first go at it. So I think it's probably a separate subject in a sense, right? So the EM budget is dedicated towards the cleanup of the Hanford site and other EM sites around the country. We continually work with Department of Energy to regarding that concern to ensure that the EM budget is dedicated to the cleanup and not towards the new nuclear that you might hear about as of late.
Okay, Jeff Schrum, are you ready to pick it up?
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks for being patient earlier with my technical difficulties. I am Jeff Schramm with the EPA, and thanks for letting me be here today. I really appreciate this group and this forum. I think it's really important as we talk about money for the Hanford site and the importance of the funding that we have. We need to be transparent. We need to celebrate our accomplishments and our victories, because that shows the American people that we're good stewards with their money, and that allows us to hopefully get future funding. And I'm going to talk about a few things that we've been up to. I don't have a presentation, so this will be more like we'll treat it like a fireside chat or something, and I'll talk to you about some of the things that EPA has been doing lately, where we've been active and what we've been working on. But one of the things I'll kind of jump in my plan of what I was going to talk about and just speak to the adaptive milestone, the M100 milestone consolidation that Ecology was talking about. And I guess one of the nice things about going third is I get to go behind, I've said this before, some great presentations and great information. And so thank you, DOE and Ecology, for your time and sharing that information. But I will say that the adaptive milestone approach was to manage some milestones that had been in abeyance, but it was also to establish a system moving forward of routine, transparent communication as far as what we are doing as a site, and what we're able to do with the funding that we're getting within a foreseeable future. And the adaptive milestones establish a yearly and every 5-year meeting with the tri-parties, because we were finding that, when we're making commitments were made that when looking at funding and some other things, those commitments weren't able to be met. And from if we're going to Congress and asking for money, milestones are very important in that decision-making process, as well as showing that we are good stewards of the taxpayers' money. And so both those things are really crucial, because it is true, the thought of being able to double our allotment in the next 6 years, it seems almost impossible, but we still have to continue to move forward. And Max, your question is really important, because what it means is that we have to continue to be very creative, and because we can't let our shared mission of protecting human health and the environment falter as we look at the resources that we have and those limitations with those resources. So we have to be creative, and we have to be transparent, and we have to talk about where our challenges are, and hopefully we've been, like I said, good stewards. So as things come up that we need to manage, we can have the funds to do that. So forgive me, that was a little off of my how I was planning to approach some of these subjects, but I wanted to kind of dovetail on some of the things that were being said. And I'll say one more thing. I'm really glad Suzanne's here, because the question about variance is in the RCRA realm, and my team and I manage the CERCLA project here on site, and I know that many of you know what that means, but for those of you who might not, the tank waste project, kind of the Central Plateau in that area, is managed by, delegated to the state and managed by the state, and the CERCLA, although Ecology has some responsibilities in assisting with some of the CERCLA cleanup, it really is our it's where we have our authority on site here. And so you just think of like the rest of the stuff on the Hanford site, cleaning up the reactor areas along the river corridor, and the soil and other sources of contaminants that we need to get cleaned up, and the groundwater that we're trying to clean. That's all in the CERCLA area. And so, Suzanne, thank you for asking that question about the variance, because I was scared to try to field that question, because I knew that it was coming. So regarding the adaptive milestone negotiations and agreement. Where we are at now is that DOE and EPA have consulted with consulted with the tribes, talked with them about that process, went out to the public for comment, and we're currently developing our responsiveness summary. And to educate folks a little bit about who may not understand what that means for CERCLA, but the responsiveness summary is a formal document that that speaks to how we addressed public comment and how we're moving forward with that. And so we're at that phase where we're developing a responsiveness summary for the adaptive milestone situation, and it is going to our regional administrator, Emma Pocon, for signature very soon. And so that gives you, and we've been working on that. The tri-party teams have been working on that. I know you've heard this for a while, but we've been working on those adaptive milestones for the better part of I think a year and a half. So that's they've really been a big part of what we've been doing here in our office, and developing that system to have honest, transparent negotiations as we move forward. Not that they haven't been, but really understanding that it's these systems that drive good outcomes. And so that's what we've been working on as far as the adaptive milestones. I could stop, and depending on how you want to address, I've got a few things that I'd like to talk about. I'm going to talk about quickly about the 300 area. I'm going to talk a little bit about hexavalent chromium. I'm going to talk about some of the stuff we've recently have been a part of at K. But I'll stop after each one and maybe field a couple questions relating to that particular area, so we can get through this. And so does anybody have any questions about where EPA's involvement or where we're at in that adaptive milestone process right now?
Doesn't look like it, but we're very interested in building 324. And
yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that. And to be fair, it is my colleague Annie. It's her project, but I can tell you a little bit about where we're at there, right? So we have developed what a ROD amendment for the 300-296 waste site underneath the 324 building. To give you kind of idea for folks that maybe aren't as familiar with CERCLA, that project has two. Thank you, Tom. I'm trying to catch those, both educate on the CERCLA process and catch the acronyms as they come out. That project has two facets. There's the removal of the building, which is a removal action, which DOE has authority to move forward. It's kind of outside of the decision, the ROD process, the pipeline process. And then there's the waste site underneath the 300-296. That is the record of decision amendment, the ROD amendment that's we're moving toward review right now, and still adjusting, and soon we hopefully we'll get to a signature on that. But that waste site, the 300-296, that's what the ROD amendment is really focused on, and what we're going to do with that, and how we're moving forward with that. And so that tells you a little bit about the process that we're moving through with that, as far as details regarding that that might be that are outlined in that ROD amendment. I don't have a lot, but I certainly can take any questions, and when I don't know, I can pass on to Annie and come back to the group here and share if there's anything. So that's kind of where we're at, and we too are very, very, very interested in the 300 area. It is another area, much like the adaptive milestones, another area that has taken a lot of time, effort, and energy over the past couple of years, like a year and a half, or some of these timeframes are escaping me, but it's been quite a long time. And so we're excited to be at the point now in working with our tri-party partners and get to a signature on that decision and move forward with that project. So
Jeff, is your organization fully staffed at this point?
That's a, you know, I don't know how to describe, you know, the situation that we've been in over the past year. I will say this. It has been very difficult over this past year. We have a number of, and when you say fully staffed, I will share with you, we've got in the office here, we have 4 RPMs and a remedial project managers like myself, and our supervisor, Laura Bulow. And they are, and Esteban, you bring up a good point, Cass Galasso, Roberto Armijo, Annie McCartney, and myself. Some folks spend the majority of their time on the Hanford site, and I would say that Annie and I spend most of our time on the Hanford site. We also have cleanup sites outside of Hanford that we manage as well. We've picked some up as there have been, you know, I'm trying to find the right word, but I'll just say as folks have left and we've lost about a third of our remedial project managers in Region 10, those of us who remain are picking up more work to try to make it to make sure that we're meeting that mission of protecting human health and the environment. And so where I think, to answer your question, Jeff, where I feel like we are that is a real challenge is in some of our support, like risk assessors and hydrogeologists and things of that nature, where, you know, I think that we have enough people in our office to manage our duties for the Hanford site. Some of our support is really thin, and that makes it very, very hard. It makes getting to some of these you know, reviews and, you know, where we're dealing with challenging nuances, it just adds time to that equation. And, you know, at the end of the day, people look at us as regulators, but we are trained project managers. And so what that means is that we too care very deeply about getting things cleaned up, you know, very quick and in a cost-effective manner. You know, so it is hard for us, Jeff, and I know that's kind of a long-winded way to answer your question, but, you know, the optimist and professional in me, as I kind of sit straight up in my chair, yes, we're doing just fine. We are we're managing it as best we can. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. I think it certainly does. From your perspective, kind of having an oversight role over the entire Hanford project, in a sense, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, where do you see any like major shortfalls or opportunities, you know, over the next 5 years, or where are the pinch points? Are they in just basic funding? Is it on the contractor side? Is it personnel with DOE, personnel with yourself or EPA or ecology? What do you see as opportunities or things that boards like this could maybe pay a little more attention to?
That's a couple things. That's a really good question. And I really thank you for that question too, because it shows, you know, how important this board is in trying to, as a partner, in trying to help in ways that it can to help us achieve our mission where we might have certain shortfalls. And I'll start off by saying certainly money is you know, we got to have money to get stuff done, and I don't begrudge this at all. And you make a very good point about EPA, you know, having oversight of the site. We take ownership of the site, and where I'm going with that is that I don't begrudge all of the attention that gets put toward the tank waste mission, right? It's really important, and we have to do something with this waste. I think sometimes in that, some of the real cleanup work, that we've done or needs to get done, say on the river corridor or some of these other sources that we are working to get put into the pipeline for characterization and maybe reach a decision document, they get forgotten about. They're not as flashy, or you can't really see groundwater, and it's you can tear down a building and that's very visible, or you can build something and that's very visible. Some of the really important work that we do underneath the ground and in the soil doesn't have, it's harder to explain that work, and it's harder to show success in that work, and it is a large part of what we still continue to do. We've done so much great work over the last 20 years of taking down buildings and getting our reactors into interim safe storage. And is one of the things that I was going to talk about, and we should talk more about this. Of the 9 reactors, 7 of them have been put into interim safe storage. Of the reactors, the last, because B reactor is now a historical, I always forget the monument park, but it being of historical significance, it's not changing. But the last reactor stack was taken down at K 2 weeks ago in dramatic form. So for those of you who saw that on social media, YouTube or whatever, if you haven't taken a look at it, it's kind of interesting. Our folks were able to go out there and watch that and be a part of it. And it has real significance. It shows the real work that we have done and are doing on site, and that K West reactor and the work that we're doing at K is the last of some of that work, and it's incredibly important. But I think to answer your question, as we look at the next 5 years, we have to be very creative in how we're approaching some of our work. We have to. I think I heard an analogy this last week where it's important that we, if you look at a house analogy and you've got a yard to mow and you've got laundry to do and you've got, windows to clean. If we go out and we mow one strip of the lawn and wash 3 t-shirts and then clean 1 window, where we're getting work done, but we're not able to really showcase and show the work that we're doing so that we can attract more funding. And so prioritizing what is important and getting that done and showing that progress is going to be incredibly important. But and I think one place where the board can really be helpful is that when we are approaching things that are maybe different than a status quo, and as far as a remediation standpoint, where we're having to get creative, and I can't think of a good example off the top of my head right now, but being able to communicate that to the board and get feedback and allow you all to know that our mission, our goals are the same, but maybe get some ideas on how to creatively approach some of these things will be really important, because we're going to have a fine amount of resource, and there's only so much that we can do. And that's where the board can really be helpful to us as we move into the future. But certainly money. You mentioned the contractor. I had the opportunity this last week to go to the Waste Management Conference and be a very, very, very small contingent of EPA to represent what we're doing at DOE's Waste Management, and it was great. I saw, there's an awful lot of people on site that are doing really, really great work and have done great work for a while. And we never, in our positions when we're looking at, things from a certain level, whether it's, administrative or we just never want to forget the great work that they're doing and the real danger that they put themselves in. And so we have to be very mindful of that all the time. But I don't want to get too winded on it. Jeff, is a good question, but I think I touched on what you were asking.
Certainly, yes. So we just have a few more minutes. Is there any more questions or comments from the board? Okay, Jeff, any last statement? We'll give you
Yeah.
a few more minutes.
Yeah, give me the hook if I talk a little bit, but I just want to make a very brief statement about this because I think there's some interest in it. It was in the agenda, and I don't think it's been touched on yet, and I want to address it. And that is the hexavalent chromium challenge that we've been managing here on site. And to give a little context, because it's complicated, anytime you're talking about risk assessment, I am not a risk assessor, and so you get into these realms, and this is a very big challenge. And there's no other way to put it. At the end of 2024, the Integrated Risk Information System, which is the IRIS, which is the peer-reviewed science-based tool that is used in calculating regional screening levels for different contaminants, updated. There was some new research that was done. It was about time. I think 1998 was the last time that these levels had been, or hexavalent chromium had been looked at. And what they addressed was the oral cancer slope factor for hexavalent chromium, and looking at peer-reviewed science, came out with information that will definitely affect the screening levels, the regional screening levels, and targets for hexavalent chromium across the site drastically. And one of the things, how we've approached that as tri-parties is we've had a series of, I think 3 or 4, I missed one last week because I was gone, but 3 or 4 meetings as tri-parties at the level of risk assessors and project managers to look at our different formulas on how we're coming up with regional screening levels, agree on how we're going to address that. What can we achievably look at? I mean, some of these levels are so low that it's going to be very problematic just to even on a reliable basis be able to screen and get data on some of these levels. And so there's been some pretty in-depth conversations about how to approach that. And ultimately that will end up affecting not only just about every operable unit that there was a reactor, because hexavalent chromium was used as an anti-corrosive agent, but also in areas within the Central Plateau. So it's kind of a to be continued. We are, as tri-party agreement or tri-party parties, looking at how to address that and working collaboratively to come to a consensus on how to move forward. So I just wanted to say that. I know folks are interested in it. That's kind of how we're working through it right now. We don't have any answers yet, but we're moving forward. So just wanted to get that in.
Okay, thanks. I think sometime in the future we would definitely be interested in knowing how that impacts the Columbia River in particular, and what is actually leaving the site and going into the river.
Absolutely. And I think that's a fair ask. And I think that's definitely something that the tri-parties can come and speak to that point, and also speak to, once we've gotten there, the process that we came to address that oral cancer slope factor and what it meant to the cleanup on the site.
Okay. Esteban, you're the last question here before we take a break.
Well, greetings from Hood River Gill. And before they give you the hook here, one of the big things in thinking me, and me learning all this, like I said, I'm not a specialist, I just have like basic knowledge. And if you want to put a title like a social scientist, my big approach, especially I'm big on education. And I think Ryan has met him. I don't know if you met him. His name is Gabriel Portugal. He's with the League of United Latin American Citizens. And he's come to me. I don't know if, like I said, also if he's met with Ryan, but like, and like you said, in all those other themes, and usually try to explain to him on the topic of environmental justice. I know there was a lot of funding removed from the Environmental Justice EPA office. Like in those topics, how would you say, and how, when it comes to a big advocate of educating, just kind of like the basics, and like you said, when it comes to like educating and the folk and to the people out there and the work that gets done out there. I know also like an organization out in, up in Hermiston and Boardman, all those folks have been wanting to learn, especially there are more farm workers and stuff, and also like teaching the farm workers about, the land and all the work that happens out there in Hanford.
I think what I can say really quickly, and I thought of two things when I was listening to your, and forgive me if you hear the vacuum behind me, they're kind of cleaning the office here, but I'll just speak to this very quickly. Our ability to be able to translate very complicated scientific vernacular, whether it be data, whether it be process, whether it be how a remedy functions, our ability to be able to translate that to the public and how they're able to is of utmost importance. It is so important that we don't, otherwise we're just end up talking to ourselves, right? And so that's really important, and not only to know how to speak to that, but getting out and doing that. And I will say one thing, Esteban, that you can take I'm fighting the vacuum here. You can take environmental, you can defund environmental justice. That doesn't take the concept away, and it doesn't take the mission out of our hearts either, right? We certainly understand there are those issues, and they still reside in us. It's just it's an administration that as choosing my words carefully, right? But that we have another focus. We're focused in other directions, but those issues don't go away. We certainly feel them and work hard to address those. I hope that kind of answers your question.
All right. That's the hook. Jeff, thank you very much for your presentation, the discussion. Likewise, our friends from ecology, we appreciate it. We will adjourn until 11 o'clock. Okay, let's reconvene. So if everyone can come back.
And just a reminder again that we're being recorded.
Yes, thank you. The next item on the agenda is Oregon Department of Energy updates. And in this section, we will be talking about DOE ODO comments as well as Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board comments on the waste incidental to reprocessing in the 200 area. So I take it this is going to be Max or Matt?
It's a combo. We have Matt, and then we have Tom and me. How about that?
Okay, take it away.
Okay. Mark, do you have something for me, or shall I try to share?
Please go ahead and share from yours.
All right, let's see what we got here. Okay, hopefully this works. PowerPoint Live, it's preparing my slides. So it's a pretty a short presentation today. Come on now, let's go ahead and get it. How's it looking for people so far? Good, good. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the current and upcoming comment periods. Not so much about our potential comments to it. We do know that some of this has been already addressed a little bit this morning by our friends from DOE or Washington Ecology, and a little bit of comments from ourselves. We're going to get into first the 200 West Weir, and then a little bit on the EMF. Then Tom has some slides about the M100 series of milestones, and then we'll finish it up with the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board and the slides that they sent me regarding what they're thinking about, talking about in regards to the 200 West Weir in particular. So as we get started here, we can see here Oregon Department of Energy. This is who we are, what we do. Y'all are used to us, so you know, we're a central repository for all the good things energy and I suppose even nuclear these days for us. So we're talking a little bit about the 200 West Weir. What is it? What is a Weir? Well, Weir stands for Waste Incidental to Reprocessing. It's a formal evaluation that the DOE does to say that no, this waste is no longer high-level waste. It is now low-level waste. So you might notice this little thing here is Yucca Mountain. That's a picture of Yucca Mountain on the side with a big red X in it. Why is there a big red X? There is no Yucca Mountain repository right now. So if you want to dispose of something, at least within the United States, without having to wait until we have a deep geologic repository, well, then it needs to be a low-level waste. And a Weir is one of the criteria that helps fulfill that. So this current comment period, this one's a short one. It was only 30 days, and the comments are due March 26th. So we're at weir_watt, WATT, at richland.gov. So there's three major components of this weir criterion. This is the plain language. One, they have to remove key radionuclides to the maximum extent that is technologically and economically practical. So there's a lot of debate about what that practical is, but when they're talking about key radionuclides for this one, a lot of times they're addressing the TSCR, tank side cesium removal system, or it's what the fancier, bigger version of TSCR called AMPS, Advanced Modular Pretreatment System. Those remove a lot of cesium and some of the strontium. There is debate about how much strontium it will be removed, and you might see that within this draft WEIR document, especially as you go into those last four appendixes where they're talking about, well, if they get this percentage of strontium out, and if it's solidified, it'll all be this Class A stuff. So there's a little bit that we can go into with one. What is it talking about by removing those key radionuclides? Two, will it meet the safety requirements comparable to NR? What's that?
I've been a hot mic there, Matt. Carry on.
It happens. More interesting to me anyway. Meets the safety requirements comparable to NRC and disposal site performance objectives. So it has to be able to go where you're going to send it. It has to be able to be placed into that shallow landfill. In this case, they're talking about with this WEIR, they're talking about in particular Energy Solutions. They're in Clive, Utah, and waste control specialists down there in Andrews, Texas. And it's expected to meet all the requirements for going in there. I would have a hard time disputing that, in fact. And three, this is the most important one for us because Oregon's often gone on record saying that we want solid disposal. If it's going to move through our state, it should be in a solid form before transiting the state. And this one, number three, is waste will be incorporated. This is the third WEIR criterion. Waste must be incorporated in a solid physical form that does not exceed Class C concentration limits. Where that solid happens is a critical decision because think of it from our standpoint, especially with an emergency response. If this material shipping as liquid, has it met that criterion 3 where it's been solidified? If there's an accident, you're spilling this stuff on the ground, or is it still a high level waste? So we do have questions about that. And there's a lot of documentation at the end of the WEIR about how much of this material might be level A, how much of this material might be level C. And to be quite frank, some of the tables, especially in Appendix D, don't make a lot of intuitive sense, at least to me, when I'm looking at the volumes of retrieval and such. So this is something that I will likely be addressing in my comments. Another comment period we've talked about a little bit already today is the effluent management facility permit modification that's going on. So Ecology, as we talked about today, they have the permitting authority over the waste treatment plant. And they've added those conditions over there. In essence, those conditions are saying that this amount of material, 87,700 gallons, can be, also known as the still bottoms, brines, can be shipped for solidification or as liquid. It doesn't specifically state within the permit where this material has to be solidified and sent to a permitted TSD facility off-site. It had previously been on the supplemental analysis for secondary waste, which is this bad boy here, the fifth or second bullet point on the right. On that document, it originally had to go into IDF, but it looks like they are shipping it off-site with the permit conditions. It does say off-site, which would indicate to me, again, Energy Solutions or WCS. It does allow for that disposal of that quantity. It breaks the halide chain. So instead of having to concentrate and making the kind of bad glass and really impacting the quality of the glass, you're able to better control the level of those halides. I do look forward to seeing some of the information of the EMF still bottoms when that comes in to see how much of that tachyon iodide that might be in that, those more volatile radioisotopes. And it is expected to improve waste loading, throughput into the melter because you're not having to constantly recycle the same stuff over and over and over again, and reduce the secondary waste volumes. So they're going to concentrate it. In essence, they're going to boil it down a lot like a 242A evaporator and really get this thick, salty solution. And also, one of the side benefits is if you're not having to put all those halides back through the system, you can help with some corrosion impacts. I don't have a lot of direct material on that, though. One big asterisk, as we noted, there is nowhere in this permit where it says where this will be grouted or shipped. So I did highlight there a table from the supplemental analysis, which is showing number 3, which this material I think was put under these volumes so that the supplemental analysis would not have to be redone. And you can see there that 332 cubic yards, oddly enough, corresponds to that exact volume right there. There is that public meeting. As Ecology told us, it is going to be held on the 24th, if I'm not mistaken. It's a little small on my screen, so I'm not sure. And this is for OHCB edification only. Not only do we have these 2 important comment periods coming up with Hanford. Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you, Tom. Integrated Disposal Facility. But there are also NRC public events coming up that the board had previously shown interest in. I would point out that there's a whole series of them from March through April. Many people within Oregon's government's going to be busy with some of these. But I would point out April 9th when they're talking about reactors that have been previously approved by either DOE or the Department of, unfortunately, they do say war, and meeting NRC requirements, and NEPA, and how NRC is going to work with NEPA going forward. And above that, and right below that, on April 30th, you're looking at reforming and modernizing NRC's radiation protection framework. So we had previously spoken about ALARA and linear no threshold. ALARA is low as reasonably achievable, and linear no threshold, LNT rules. So those big ones are coming up in April. That's something that you should remember as a board if you wish to comment as a member of the public for, or do your own research on. That's all I have for my section. Any quick questions for me before I hand it over to Tom and M100?
Matt, before Tom hops up here, could you just explain, for the board's knowledge, Class A and Class C waste, and sort of that comes up a lot here, why that matters and what it means?
So why that matters is that if it's a Class A waste, it is the lowest category of waste, at least in how much radioactivity is within the waste itself. So if you could generalize it as a hazard, it's the lower hazard material. It is very important because the facility in Clive, Utah can only accept Class A waste. So if it's above that, if any of this tank waste is above that or this treated waste, it has to go to Andrews, Texas. So further away, and we are unsure of the transportation route proposed. As the board knows, we still don't know much about the transportation routes. But if it goes to Andrews, Texas, there is thought that it might not enter Oregon. It might not, especially if it goes on a certain railway and heads north. But it still makes a lot of sense for any of the Class A material to go along that I-84 corridor and the UP Railroad main line that's along there. So I would expect that to enter Oregon. And the more Class A waste you can get, obviously Clive is closer, it's a little bit cheaper. As an answer to Mike Freeman's question earlier about how much technetium could potentially go to Utah, there isn't an upper limit. As long as it meets the acceptance criterion and as a Class A concentration, they can keep taking plenty of isotopes there. They can just take plenty of curies as long as it meets that concentration. But yeah, that is the big reason why Class A versus Class C, or B.
Class
or
C has to go down to Texas if it's Class C, which is more radioactive.
It is. It is a higher concentration of radioisotopes within the Class C waste. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. All right. Well, yep. See no one else, Tom. Do you want me to control the slides, or have you got it?
If you'd be willing, that'd be great.
Sounds good.
All right. So you've heard some things about the new M100 proposed milestones, and I realized that there hadn't been an OHCB meeting since those were announced and the comment period closed. So I just wanted to give a really quick overview because it's a really important thing. Matt talks a lot about tanks and tank waste cleanup and the VIT plant and all that stuff. The M100 or the proposed M100 milestones address everything else on the site, all the cleanup. There's an asterisk there, but most of the cleanup, and will be the last milestones done before DOE shuts off the lights and leaves the site cleaner. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So there was quite possibly the best public meeting I've ever seen at Hanford or on Hanford on this topic. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. Watch that to supplement what I'm saying because they tell everything really well. So in 1989, when the Tri-Party Agreement was signed, they were hungry for cleanup. And so they ordered everything on the menu at the new cleanup restaurant. And that covered demolition of the giant canyons, that covered characterization of all the soils and groundwater, and it covered remediation. And they sort of backed up the kitchen. There's no way to fund that work. There's no room on the table to get it all done at once. And they couldn't eat it all. It was too much. They ordered, their eyes were too big. So let's go to the next slide. And this is sort of talking, this picture is a cartoon. It's not geographically accurate. I just wanted to throw some labels on there. The strategy for having these three different categories worked fairly well on the river corridor. There's a lot more space to move around. You can sequence things appropriately. But once you get on the Central Plateau, everything is sort of stacked on each other. You've got utilities running through everywhere. You've got waste sites 200 feet above each other. So you might be trying to characterize the surface while remediating the groundwater 200 feet below. And oh yeah, there's these giant canyons on top of those waste sites, so you can't even get to them. So they're in different stages of cleanup, and all the milestones were set sort of before people knew how much work was going to have to go into cleaning this stuff up realistically. So there's budget constraints, and you could have a milestone to finish cleaning up this waste site, which is underneath a waste site that hasn't been characterized yet, which is underneath the canyon. And they were all conflicting and battling for budgets and workforce and priorities. So they can get in each other's way politically as well. So with the next slide, they're all in one bucket. So the tri-party agencies can sit down and say, okay, well, we really want to get 200 PW1 cleaned up. There's a record of decision in place. What do we need to do above that to make it happen within the budget constraints that we have? Knowing that, there's also a tank farm retrieval going on over here, and there's transuranic waste coming out over here. And, we know that this is a 20-year project. So, what steps do we have to make? So Jeff was talking about mowing the lawn one row at a time. Let's make some progress and sort of, start at one end of the lawn instead of starting over here and then going to the other side and then doing a line in the middle and then going to fold some laundry. So they're really looking at collaborating and doing things intuitively. And that's sort of the whole concept of M100. And when you're looking at a really complex site, sometimes it makes sense to put everything in one bucket and, take one bite at a time. So let's go to the next slide. So everyone's mentioned, M100 will include all three of those major milestone series. The agencies will sit down and plan out what's happening in the next sort of 3 to 5 year window, because that matches the budget cycle. And then every 5 years, they'll look and see, okay, this project we really want to get done in the 2050s, and it has a 15-year lead up. So how does that fit into the process? So let's go to the next one. Here's our position on our comment letter. It seems to make sense as long as it works as designed. We want we want to know what's in that big bucket. We want a listing of all the milestones that are proposed and under M100. A lot of these milestones have been in abeyance, which means there's no strategy to get them done because there's no budget. So instead of not meeting the milestone and calling it failed, they just said, oh, well, we're not going to enforce that. It's in abeyance. So we want to know sort of what that schedule looks like. It would be great if there was a website that had an interactive timeline that says this operable unit will get cleaned up, we think, in the 2060s, and just sort of arm wave it, not enforceable, but give sort of a roadmap. We request that when DOE does their annual cleanup priorities comment period, that they bring the results of these annual meetings to Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board and the Hanford Advisory Board, maybe a separate public meeting, to sort of spell out how the milestones changed based on this year's meeting and what's the future looks like. And then, looking at institutional knowledge, we know that some people retire, and that's they take a lot of information with them, and a lot of decisions that have been, handshake agreements over the years. We really need to make sure that those handshake agreements get well documented, and the rationale for all these decisions are spelled out. So when there's eventual transitions, this cleanup's going to take 7 or 8, maybe 10 professional lifespans. So you're going to have to pass the baton. So you need to write that down. So speaking of institutional knowledge, you may know that Odo has written cleanup books on Hanford. This one's the first 10 years, first 20 years, first 25 years. So right now we're working on, the working title is A Decade of Cleanup, because we're looking at the 25 to 35 year cleanup horizon. I hope it's not taking off more than we can chew, because what we're trying to do is treat this sort of as a Hanford 101, and really go through the whole site, every area, talk about what it is, what it was, what progress has been made, and then what progress is left to be made. So I have a teaser on the next slide of just a couple pages of really draft. It's not cleared by anything, so don't screenshot this or anything. Just really a lot of graphics, a lot of call out boxes with the little details, and going starting in the 300 areas, then going to the 100s, and then the Central Plateau. Matt is helping write all the sections on the tank waste treatment mission. Mark is talking about transuranic and transportation and emergency response. And Sarah is writing stuff on the National Resource Damage Assessment. So really a collaborative effort with Max's help, making sure that we don't say things that we're not supposed to say. And goal here is to get to the printer by the end of September. We're having some internal transitions with our graphics team, so might have to push that a little bit depending on how fast we can hire someone. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and we're hoping to also have a sort of a digital companion that'll be a GIS-based website that allows you to go in and see where all of the institutional controls are going to be and how long they're going to be there. So you can go and zoom in on just one area and say, okay, this is what's left. This is what This is the burden that we're leaving on the region when the cleanup is done. So that was a lot to cover. I'll take questions before passing it to Max.
Are you taking pre-orders, Tom?
The book will be free, and it'll be a PDF primarily. We're going to print some copies for libraries and sort of a desktop reference for critical people. So yeah, there will be pre-orders. I have a couple pre-readers that are being really helpful. I'm trying to write this at like an 8th grade reading level, so it's really approachable. That's a challenge when it comes to Hanford, but we're doing what we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Matt, are we ready to segue into board comments?
I think Max was gonna speak next, unless there's something going on. Then I'll start sharing the screen again and get your slides up.
Great.
Yeah, Jeff, if you don't mind, and I'll be brief. I don't even have slides. That's how brief I'll be. Because we have enough slides, and then we're gonna hop over to the board's presentation here. What I wanted to mention to the board and kind of keep everybody in the loop on this is around two things that are, maybe we call them Hanford adjacent. We try to keep this board focused on Hanford and Oregon's interest in the Hanford cleanup, but sometimes there are things that are sort of in the, call it the ecosystem of the Hanford world, that sort of spill over and are worthwhile of conversation. This is probably one of those topics. A couple of weeks ago, we shared this with the board, but our team submitted a comment letter to U.S. Department of Energy. And there's two things here. We submitted a comment letter to U.S. Department of Energy about a proposal that U.S. DOE, not Hanford, but U.S. DOE headquarters has put forward related to how DOE reviews and permits new nuclear power facilities, commercial nuclear, I should say, non-commercial power generation nuclear power facilities, advanced reactors. I say non-commercial because there's sort of a somewhat narrow slice of nuclear power reactors that DOE has approval authority over. Primarily, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is the approval body at the federal level for new nuclear power facilities in our country. DOE has approval authority for non-commercial power reactors, which typically includes reactors that are R&D types of facilities. And those have tended to be at DOE's national labs, Idaho National Lab, elsewhere. So those facilities are permitted under DOE's authority. I think that what they are doing now is investigating how that authority could be broadened. That's just kind of, there's a little bit of a speculation here, to the types of reactors that are sort of bigger, non-R&D, reactors that produce a lot of electricity that could be used for, say, a data center, something like that. So in that spirit, DOE put out a proposed rule that would, under NEPA, allow DOE to add advanced reactor approvals to what they call the categorical exclusion list of their NEPA regulation. The NEPA is National Environmental Policy Act. The classic federal law that always gets targeted as permitting and regulatory burden is always under NEPA. But the law does have has served a good purpose, and that purpose is usually transparency and public participation in government decision making. That's the idea. So under the DOE proposal, they could approve advanced reactors under NEPA, their NEPA authority, with really no review whatsoever under this categorical exclusion list. We didn't really like that idea, and so submitted a comment letter on behalf of Oregon Department of Energy to DOE headquarters saying as much. We certainly weren't alone. There was many other states, state governments, all sorts of other individuals who submitted comments that are pretty similar to ours. The Oregon Department of Justice even added on its voice to a multi-state level letter that wasn't my group, but the Oregon DOJ signed on to another letter. Anyway, I just want people to know that that's sort of out there. The other thing that's sort of related to, as I mentioned, the sort of Hanford adjacent is this concept, and this is what's listed on the agenda as a nuclear innovation campus. This concept that DOE has floated, it's really at its core a reworking of the effort to find a national repository for high-level waste spent nuclear fuel. As we mentioned previously, the effort to find a permanent deep geologic repository, really a landfill underground, for the most radioactive waste, high-level defense waste, spent nuclear fuel from commercial facilities, has stalled out for a very long time. There's been various restarting efforts in recent times. There was one called the consent-based siting under previous administration, and then it was renamed to the collaboration-based siting. You could keep the acronym, but change the first word. And now it's more or less under this rubric of the Nuclear Innovation Campus, which is a proposal from DOE to solicit input from states in partnership with local communities, but has to be state-led, to submit a bid, more or less, to US DOE to say, we're interested in hosting the Nuclear Innovation Campus, which includes waste disposal. It has to include that waste disposal. And that would also include a bunch of other things, in the nuclear sort of innovation landscape. The promise of jobs, investment, advanced research, scientific base, a whole host of things you can imagine. Fuel reprocessing, fuel fabrication, sort of that whole supply chain up and down. But it has to include nuclear waste disposal. That's sort of the fundamental. Anyway, that solicitation has been out since, I believe, January. It closes in April 1st, I think, and that's not a joke. It closes on April 1st. Oregon is not interested. State law in Oregon bans the permanent disposal of radioactive waste. And even if it didn't, I don't think we'd be interested. Washington State, and this is where I'd be careful to speak for Washington State, not a Washington resident. But Washington State legislature, and Tom has been tracking this for, Washington State legislature has had a bill under consideration whether they may be interested in applying for this. I don't know that it's going to pass. I haven't been tracking it as closely, but it has had at least some conversation in the state of Washington. And we're watching it because if that goes forward, it would be in the Tri-Cities, Hanford area, sort of that complex there that we'd be keenly interested in how that might proceed. So we'll see where that goes. We'll report back to this board on how that effort proceeds. I really don't know, and couldn't really opine on how Washington might go forward with that or not. But there you go. Tom makes a little note in the chat there. So we'll track that. Other states I've heard across the country might be interested in this. Perhaps to me, maybe a little more surprising than I expected it to be, but it has been received by some states as an interested opportunity for other states to pursue. So as we get more information after that period closes in April, we'll report back to the board and sort of share with everybody. Finding a national repository for spent nuclear fuel, high-level defense waste is in the national interest of everybody, right? Whether you're an Oregonian, a Washingtonian, an American, this is in your interest to get this idea solved. But the how and the where are so critical and very difficult to solve, as we've seen over generations when this problem hasn't been solved. So new effort, and we'll see where it goes, and we'll report back to the board on this. That is my end of report on those issues, Jeff.
Thank you, Max. It's stay tuned, right?
It really is. This is sort of next time we get together, we'll probably have more information to share on these topics and bring it back to the board.
Okay, great. Matt, do you have some slides to show us?
Let's see if I can do it right twice. Pretty rare. Let's go.
Okay, we're going to segue over to a discussion about whether or not the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board wants to comment on the 200 West area waste incidental for reprocessing. So I think hopefully you all have had a chance to review the proposed comment letter. That's what we want to discuss. And I've got three simple slides here to kind of set it out and open the discussion. So let's see. Matt, that's the third slide. Can we start with the first one?
Oh, that's the third one.